Okay, good afternoon. This is Don Rodriguez. We're going to get started. Welcome to the fourth and final day of Analytics Week. Today we're going to be talking about attribution. And first, I'd like to give a shout out to all those in the audience who have been with us every day. I know that there's a good chunk of you who have been with us every day, and I am certainly very appreciative and humbled by your attendance, and I hope that you have found the investment of your time worthwhile. For those of you who might be first-time attendees, just a little bit about NetElixir. We are a full-service search marketing agency founded about 10 years ago. We have our headquarters here in Princeton, where I'm talking to you from. We have an office in London and also quite a significant operation in Hyderabad, India. Altogether, we are 85 fanatically analytical search marketers that together have a combined experience in search marketing of well over 5.5 million hours. This is a brief overview of our lines of business. Our core market is managing paid search and doing SEO services for our clients. We have done social media optimization in the past. One thing that makes us unique, a little bit unique in the agency world, is that we have an in-house technology team and an in-house technology platform called LXR. LXR is the multi-channel technology we use to manage our clients' online marketing campaigns. We also sponsor and host a site called LXR Marketplace, which is a site where you can find 21 free search marketing tools that are aimed at small businesses. That's lxrmarketplace.com. And finally, we have LXR SEO, which is our SEO toolkit for small businesses, and you can find that and sign up for a free trial at lxrseo.com. We also do consulting. For example, we are talking about analytics this week, and we have done quite a bit of analytics consulting in the past, including some work for people like Toys R Us and Brady Corporation. We also have done digital marketing strategy consultations and some work with the development of executive dashboards and KPI reporting. Because we are talking analytics this week, we'd just like to highlight, for those of you who are not familiar with us, some of the standard analytics packages that we offer. What I'm highlighting today are packages that are tailored at your experience level with Google Analytics. For example, we have a couple of what we call rookie packages, which are one-time consultations just to make sure that you get off on the right foot with Google Analytics. On Monday, I talked about how important it is to track your traffic coming into your site perfectly for Google Analytics, and that is the intent of these starter packages. For those of you who are a little bit more experienced with Google Analytics but might not have the time or the headcount to dive deep into it on a frequent basis, we offer what we call insight packages, delivered monthly or weekly. These are intended to help you just get visibility to some of those key metrics that can help you manage your business and grow your business and improve your business. And finally, for those advanced users out there, we have 3 service offerings that are a result of a survey we did a year ago, where the overwhelming response was that users of Google Analytics are looking for ideas to grow revenue and increase profits, and that's what these 3 service offerings are intended to do. We have a service that will identify your most profitable keywords by revenue and gross margin. We have the market expansion uses your site search data to find new market opportunities for you. And finally, the key product sales driver identifies those online marketing campaigns that are driving the sales of your key or top performing products. NetElixir University, which is the host of this week, is something we started several years ago in hopes to share best practices and knowledge with 10,000 businesses by the end of this year. Those of you who have been with us all week have heard me tell you this, that we have trained over 8,000 so far, and by the end of today, we hope that'll be closer to 9,000. We encourage you to join our LinkedIn group at the link that you see there. That's also where you will find the thought experiments that we have been highlighting each day, posted as well. And you'll see today's thought experiment towards the end of our presentation. I would want to remind you to please use the question feature to submit any questions you might have. I hope to have time at the end for Q&A, as well as if there's any technical issues, please let us know that way as well. For those of you who have not been with us before, as part of our Analytics Week event, we are offering complimentary health checks to attendees for either your Google Analytics, your paid search campaigns, or your SEO efforts. It's a great time right before you start your holiday planning to just do a sanity check on how well you're doing. We just ask you to email us at university@netelixir.com, and you can include the subject line there, as well as if you could also please include your name and number in case we have a challenge reaching you by email. Here's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to define attribution. I'm going to share some research findings from the study we just completed on conversion path and attribution. And then I'm going to dive into the Google Analytics multi-channel and attribution model reports. And time permitting, I'm also going to show you a pretty neat feature from Google, a customer journey tool that you can use as well. And also highlight an action plan for modeling your own attribution. So let's get started. Some of you might be familiar with Justin Catroni, who is an analytics evangelist for Google. He's also the person who taught me a lot of what I know about Google Analytics years ago. And this is a quote that he made at a conference I was at last month. And I think if you Google that, you'll find quite a few articles around the idea of last-click attribution being not such a crazy thing. It's another interesting view of attribution. That image in the background is an actual conversion path from the study we just completed. So you can see why some retailers throw their arms up in the air when they start thinking about multi-step attribution. So what is attribution? This is my definition. It is most definitely art and science, and it's just the way you assign credit to your marketing investments based on the customer journey so that you can hopefully maximize your return per marketing dollar spent. So there's a nice little graphic that shows you different weighting by different types of touch points, and that's really sort of the concept in a nutshell. When you think about attribution, it really exists on a spectrum. So for example, at the far left is where most of us are today. We're using a single touch interaction such as last click or first click, or for example, Google's default non-direct last click in attribution. And I'll show you some data which says that's really not probably the smartest thing to do. And then you migrate, just like any other capability, towards the holy grail, which is integrating every touch point that you spend money on and doing it by the individual and then aggregating that so that you can weight accordingly, and you can use things like machine learning and predictive analytics, right? And so, for example, using multi-channel funnel reports and using attribution models is a sort of a first step in evolving your attribution capability. So why is last click or first click stupid? This is an example from our research paper. I'm showing you the top email-driven conversion paths by sector. There are 40 paths that contain a total of 80 steps. Of those 80, 57 are email. And there are 29 paths that have email as the last click, and I have bolded those. Okay? And of those, 21 of them have more than one step. And then you'll find email in the path, for example, right here, of those 29, 16 other times. Okay? So for the sake of argument, let's assume that every place you see the word email, it's a separate email marketing campaign that you're going to measure and judge by itself. So here's an analysis of why, for example, last click or first click might be stupid. In last click attribution, those 29 email campaigns would get all of the $5.8 million that those paths generated, while the other 16 campaigns would get 0. So you can see that right here. Last click sales, 5.8 for 29, 0 for the 16. That gives you, for the last click, an ROI of 1900% for the 29 and 0 for the 16, right? Now, for the sake of the argument, I used a linear model just to show you what a multi-step attribution would look like. And if you use a linear model, which basically just spreads the value evenly across each step, the 29 campaigns would get a slight reduction of $1 million to $4.8 million, and that $1 million would get attributed to the 16 emails, which gives you still a 1,500+% ROI for the 29 and a pretty healthy 625% ROI for the 16. I think I didn't mention, I'm assuming that it costs you about $10,000 to run each campaign. So that's why you have 29, 290, and 16, 160. All right. So think about this scenario. Let's assume that every campaign is done by a different email marketing manager who gets judged by the success of his campaigns. In this scenario, the last click, you have one email marketing manager who might be really ecstatic, and then in this scenario, you have one who's working on his resume. In the linear, you have two email marketing managers that are probably relatively happy. All right, so you tell me which model would be better for you. So now I'm going to highlight some of the findings in this research that we did. First, I'll just give you a quick overview on how we did this research. We looked at the first 4 months of 2015, January through April, and had a 90-day look-back period, which means those customer journeys went back as far as October 1st. We took all of our data and segmented into these sectors, and I defined 20 different custom channel definitions that we use to make this analysis as granular as possible, and I'll show you that in a little bit. And here's just some of the data set highlights. It was well over 500,000 transactions, almost $60 million in total revenue. We had over 89,000 unique conversion paths that ranged in value from $236,000 all the way down to $7.49. We had over 36,000 conversion paths that had 10 or more steps. All told, we had 2.3 million customer touch points in this data set. This is a view of some of the custom channels that I defined for the study. The intent was to minimize what I call non-attributable traffic, like referrals, to some sort of marketing campaign that you spend money on. And the other thing I did was I did expand some of the default definitions to deal with things like misattributed traffic that I spoke about on Monday. For example, I also expanded organic search to include a lot of the third-tier search engines that show up in your referral report. And you can see, for example, I've broken out branded or trademark campaigns versus non-trademark. I have a channel for affiliate sites. I have PLA ads from Google. I have a bucket for vendors, suppliers, channel partners. So as I said, as granular as I could. This is probably a little hard for you to see, but this is the performance by those channels. And for example, I start with direct because that is the overwhelming largest contributor. And you can see the total conversion value that had direct somewhere in its path was $35 million, which is 61% of our total value. The average path length was 6.8, and it was 283,000 transactions, 74,000 different conversion paths. Okay. I have teased this week about surprises, and this was one of the biggest surprises to me, and that's the lack of contribution from social. You can see here it's 1%, right? $600,000 on a almost $60 million base. And given the hype that social gets and the investment that CMOs are making in social, this was quite a shock to me. Another smaller surprise to me was the fact that the affiliates actually outperformed non-trademark paid search. And that really is just speaking anecdotally from my own personal experience. You know, when I was managing the e-commerce channel for a specialty retailer, my affiliate program did not outperform my, what I called then the generic paid search efforts. The other one that was interesting was the fact that display's contribution was relatively low. And I think that this is really driven by the fact that a lot of our clients really use display only for remarketing, so therefore the audience that is getting exposed to that those display ads is somewhat more smaller. And many of our clients just don't have the budget to, for example, invest in display campaigns, for example, for brand awareness purposes. And then last but not least is you can see some evidence that the death of comparison shopping engines that are not Google's PLA's shopping campaigns continues with the introduction of the product listing ads back in 2012. This is a view of path length. This is a frequency. This is a histogram. So this is the number of paths between 10 and 20 steps, for example, right? And you can see I mentioned before that we had over 39,000 above 10. So this is 39,000 paths above 10, right? The average, just so you know, is 4.5. And 61% of the conversion value came from paths with more than one step. So this is a big takeaway, right? This is one reason why using a single interaction attribution model does not make sense. Because basically you're saying, I'm taking 60% of my revenue and I'm not giving the marketing that generated that revenue any credit. And this is the number of conversion by path steps. So you can see the single path is by far the largest bucket, but when you add up all of the multi-step paths, they are 59%. So single interaction conversions are only 41% of the actual transactions in the study. Again, another reason to consider multi-step attribution. And here's a breakout of those single-step conversions by sector. And the thing I want you to notice here is that there is no sector where either the percentage of transactions or percentage of dollars exceeds 50% for a path length of 1, right? Which is essentially what we're treating every conversion as when we use a single interaction attribution model. Here's a view of the single path conversions by channel, by sector. So the sectors are across the top. Here are different channels. This is the baseline. This is the single path percentage contribution. Again, this is revenue contribution. So you can see, for example, let's use direct. 14%, right, of all single path conversion value comes from direct, right? And then if you break it down by sector, what I've done is I've used the green and red to highlight outperforming and underperforming, and just so you know, I use 10% difference from the baseline. So for example, B2B here is significantly higher in direct for those single path conversions, and I think that's a function of two things. One, B2B, you get a lot of repeat business, probably more so than a B2C company. And also, I think it also shows you one of the limitations in Google Analytics' attribution capabilities, in that look back period is only 90 days. So if you were with us yesterday, Melissa Anderson of PC Name Tag, she has customers who buy once a year from her. Their purchase cycle is 12 months. So a 90-day look back period is never going to capture all of those touch points before they buy. So I think part of this is the fact that the journey path is just not being entirely captured. The other thing I'd like to point out here, which I found interesting, but sort of made sense after I asked some people about it, for Google shopping campaigns, the fashion and apparel sectors outperformed. And when you think about it, those are products that are very visually oriented, so obviously a visual ad medium would seem to make sense. Here is the average touches per conversion by sector. I told you the average was 4.5, but it's kind of interesting to see how it varies from a little over 7 for fashion all the way down to B2B at 2.4. Again, I think that value is a little bit deceiving because of the look back period and the sales cycle issue. But, you know, fashion, when I asked one of my coworkers about this, right, she told me that she goes to her favorite fashion sites all the time, even though she's not in the mode of buying. She just wants to make sure she knows what's going on and make sure there's no deal she's not aware of. So that might explain why you see 7 touches per conversion in fashion. Now we'll talk a little bit about the contribution by the position in your funnel. Okay, so these are our custom channels on the left. Here is our baseline again. First click percentage is just what you think. It showed up as the first click in the conversion path. And then I defined something which was what I called the first interaction, which means I'm going to add together any single path conversions because one click is still a first click, as well as that first click percentage. So the 14 and the 21 add up to 35, right? Because that sort of helps you understand how these channels play in terms of bringing people into that top of the funnel for you. So you can see, for example, direct dominates first interaction and last interaction, and actually has a significant chunk that is both first and last. So in other words, direct was the first interaction and the last interaction. What I think is interesting, there's 2 things I think that you might find interesting in here. Organic, look at organic, 23% of the contribution was first interaction versus 5% for last click. So think about it. If you're using last click attribution, right, you're missing a lot of the contribution from organic. Now the next one, some of you might find this surprising. I would tell you I didn't. I found this surprising last December when I discovered the customer journey tool that Google has and started playing around with it. The fact that the branded paid search has such a stronger impact on the top of the funnel versus the tail end of the funnel. But if you go play around with that tool, and I'll hopefully show you that tool later, you'll see that across multiple industries, this is, just as our data shows, this is the reality. So you can also see here, Bing brand is 4% versus 1%, right? So a similar type of weighting. So here what I've done is I've taken the different, I always view these as the core markets, because these tends to be markets where your repeat customers are coming back to. This is direct, email, and organic. And what I'm doing here is I'm now slicing their contribution by funnel position. So for example, using direct, I had mentioned that direct was $35 million in total conversion value. And this breaks down that $35 million based on whether or not it was a single step path, a first click interaction, a last click interaction, somewhere in between, or if it was first and last. Okay. So one of the first things you should notice here is that the difference between first click and last click for direct is a little bit different from that chart that I just showed you, which was the overall view. This is just looking at direct's share. And you can see when you split that up by funnel position, the overwhelming majority of direct's contribution is coming from a last click interaction. And I'm assuming this is the data that motivated Google to change their attribution model to a non-direct last click interaction in Google Analytics. All right. Now look at organic. Organic is the reddish, the darker orange, right? So you have single path, first click, and last click. So a very similar trend to what I showed you before. And then middle. So the question is, where are you focusing your SEO efforts? Are you focusing your SEO efforts on likely first click type terms, or are you focusing further down the funnel? So something to consider with respect to your SEO strategy when you look at this data. And again, this is something you can look at yourself for your very own business and make that determination. This is the 5 CPC channels, pay-per-click channels that I defined, and your takeaway should be this one. All 5 of them are very strong contributors on that first click interaction. So one takeaway for all of you retailers out there is when you think about the idea that you're spending money on your own trademark name and you think that that might be a waste because, hey, they're typing my name and they must know who I am. Look at this data and kind of rethink that strategy, right? Because there's a good chance that, that's a top of the funnel search coming into you off of your name. Maybe it's a referral. Someone says, hey, go check out jefferspet.com, and you go type in Jeffers Pet. So finally, this is one of the hypotheses we had in our paper was, where does display contribute? Now again, remember display's contribution overall was very small, and I'm breaking that contribution down by path position. And notice the jump in the middle, right here. Again, think about what I said about display. A lot of our clients use it for remarketing only, which means it's not going to be necessarily first because they've already been to the site. Also, the other thing to think about too is the fact that you have, the session timeout issue with Google Analytics, where if you haven't changed your Universal Analytics timeout factor, if you're using the old version, it's 30 minutes. You walk away from your computer for more than 30 minutes, and you come back and you start clicking again. That becomes a direct visit, which would push a display-driven session into the middle of the funnel as opposed to the end of the funnel. All right, here's today's poll before I jump into some live demonstration. All right, we want to know if you're using either multi-channel funnel reports or the attribution models to help you make decisions. Hey, this is great. I'm very impressed with my audience today. I'm going to keep it open for a few more seconds. All right, I am going to do my typical countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, closing, sharing. All right, so 2/3 of you said that you use multi-channel funnels. So when I get to that part, I'm going to talk really fast because I'm going to assume a lot of you know what they are. So we can spend more time on the attribution models. And I'm going to hide that. Come on, there we go. All right. So before I jump over to my browser, I just wanted to give a shout out to my friends at Jeffers Pet and Ruth for letting us use their account for the live demo portion. So I'm going to give them a little plug. If you're not familiar with them, jefferspet.com. She sells stuff for pets, for horses and horseback riding, and for my friends down there in Texas who might have the farmstead rebate thing going on with goats and longhorns in their backyard, she also sells supplies for raising livestock. And for the pet owners like myself, what I love about her site is she has a lot of natural type food products, and she has a lot of things made in America. And if you're familiar with some of the horror stories about stuff made outside the country, that's a good thing. So there's my plug. Okay, so what I opened up, I am in, actually, I'm going to be here first. All right, I wanted to show you a statistics version. I'm going to go through multi-channel funnels a little bit fast because 2/3 of you say you use them. So this is what you're looking at is the assisted conversion, which is the first one in the list. Okay, and assisted conversion just means that the channel, and I've used my custom channels here, the channel shows up somewhere other than last. So for example, it could be first, it could be middle. Okay, it could be first, middle, and last. Right? Which one thing you'll learn is the assisted conversion report can have double counting for that reason. Right? There are 3 ways to look at the data. You could look at the assisted conversions. You could look at a first interaction, which will compare first click versus last click. Like, so for example, here, do you remember when I said to you, when I looked at by position funnel, direct had a significantly higher chunk? Well, look at this data. You've got 6,200 first and 8,900 last, right? So that's consistent with our overall finding. And then, for example, here's organic, right, where not as dramatic a difference as I showed you for our aggregated data. You have 5,500 versus 4,100. Right? And then finally, you have the total conversion view, which will give you the total number of conversions that path touched. So for example, you can see direct was in 11,000. I'm looking at 20,000 right now, so a little more than half. I forgot to show you some of the settings. Just so you know, you can count your goal conversions as well as your e-commerce. So I had it pre-selected for e-commerce. You can choose all of your conversions or just, for example, conversions from AdWords. And then you can set this look back period anywhere from 1 day to 90 days. By setting it to the max 90, you're giving yourself your best shot for identifying the true first interaction. And then I don't have time to go into it in detail, but you can use these conversion segments that they have predefined, as well as you can make up your own over here, right? So for example, you can look at first and last interaction that are direct and see how that contributes. Okay, so that's assisted conversion. This top conversion path report is what I use to collect all the data in our study. So we collected this report from a lot of our GA accounts that we have access to. So I wanted to show you, I inverted this because when you go down in one conversion, you tend to see longer click paths, right? So I'm using my custom channel. So you can see, for example, this one here had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps. Okay. So this shows you your top conversion paths, right? So you can see, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, top 4 of them are single path, okay? And you can sort by value or number of transactions. So that's a conversion path report. You can choose other parameters for your primary dimension. So for example, if you're interested here, this is kind of a neat one. You want to get really granular. This will show you name campaigns in your path. So for example, paid search or email, wherever you use the UTM campaign parameter, you can kind of see what the steps were. Okay, so that's top conversion. 2 other ones that you should be familiar with. Time lag, just what you think it is. This is the time it takes to convert, 0 to all the way up to 90 days. You can see here, most of them happen in 1 day, and about 56% happen within 1 day. Notice the U-shape here, right? So, for example, when I see this, I think, well, maybe we should use a U-shape attribution model, right, because of the time lag. And then when you look at path length, which is just what you think it is, you see that sort of frequency distribution that I showed you earlier, right? Where 1, 2, and then a blip at the end. And this makes you think, well, maybe we should use time decay in terms of attribution. And now I will show you the model comparison. Okay, so there are six different models, default models. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7, sorry. That you can use. Last interaction, you can see by the icon, it kind of shows you what they are. So last interaction, just what you think. That last click gets all the credit. Last and non-direct, which is Google Analytics default attribution model when you go look at any kind of conversion data elsewhere in the reports, is that last source before any directs gets 100% credit. Here's last AdWords click, which gives the last AdWords click 100% credit. First interaction is the opposite of last. The first interaction gets 100%. Linear is peanut butter, and you just spread it across. Time decay is that reverse exponential, so weighting the more frequent versus the further away. And position or U-based is a way that you can sort of give more credit to the top of your funnel and more credit to the bottom. So for example, like if new customer acquisition is important to you and you want to weight the top of the funnel channels a little bit stronger because they're bringing people into the funnel, you can use position-based. All right, and I'll just show you the comparison. You can compare 3 models at a time. And I'm going to pull up last, first, and non. This is the middle. This is Google Analytics default. So for example, here's direct, right? Last interaction, 89.25. You saw that number before. Interesting. Last non-direct, 4,300, right? Which means it's you got like direct, or whatever happening at the end of your path. And then first interaction, 62.67. Organic, 41.25 for last. First is 5,500, right? So you could compare that conversion value. Now here's what I wanted to really show you is one of the neat features about this is the ability to build a custom model. So for example, this is a custom model I built, and this is a U-shaped distribution, and I will pull up the edit screen. Okay. So I call this no direct, brand reduced, non-brand increase, no bounces, U-shaped. Okay. So U-shaped is that position, and you can set these 3 parameters however you want to weight first versus last versus middle. Has the same look back type feature, and then down here is these things they call them custom credit rules. Okay, so if you're familiar with setting up any kind of filters in Google Analytics reporting, it works very similarly, right? Include, exclude. So for example, I said, give me all direct visits, give them 0 credits. I'm removing all direct visits from the conversion path. Here I said, give me all the brand paid search for Bing and Google, and I'm cutting their value by half, okay? Because I'm saying, hey, the likelihood is that some of those people know me already. It's more a convenience click rather than a demand gen click. And then on the contrary, for non-trademark and non-brand, I'm saying, ooh, weight them higher because that brings a larger percentage of new people to me. And then finally, if it's a bounce visit, I wanted to give it no credit because that didn't do me any good. Okay, so that's, and I could add another one if I wanted to, right? So, so that's how you apply a custom rule. I built several custom models. Because because I wanted to compare this one. Okay, this is it. Okay, so I have U-shaped, linear, time decay. The custom rules are all the same in each of the three. And I was looking to see if it made a difference in marketing dollars, revenue dollars per marketing dollar spent, based on for lack of a better word, the time series that I chose. And what was really interesting is if you could just kind of glance through here, look, 6,000, 5,900, 5,900, 4,600, 4,600, 4,600, 35, 36. I think you get the gist. The values were very, very, very similar. Okay, so this is the table that just kind of summarized my playing around here. So just so you know, marketing program revenue is revenue coming from channels where dollars get spent. So things like email marketing, SEO efforts, paid search, display, right? So, because it's very hard to, let's say, assign marketing dollars to like referral traffic or direct traffic. So that's the way I looked at this. Right? And these are the three custom models I built. This is Google's default attribution model for the marketing program channels that I've got defined, right? So here I built three models trying to see if I could, find a better way, so to speak. And look what happened. Look how close my three custom models are to the actual default attribution in Google Analytics. I mean, that's got to be within what, a statistician would call the normal variance, right? So, was the time that I spent on this worth it, right? Who knows, right? Another thing that I'd like to point out, look, this is last non-direct 1.6 million in marketing channels. This is last interaction 1 million in marketing channels, because this one includes direct as the last click. And direct is not included in my marketing program summary. So you can kind of see the impact of last non-direct, which is, again, another reason why Google changed their attribution model, right? And then you can hear the other. These are all the default values. So first interaction was 1.4 versus last non-direct, right? And what I did was I estimated marketing spend for things like email, SEO, right? And I made that assumption for each model, and then I just did the math. I just took, the marketing, driven revenue over the marketing dollars, and you can see the variance here, right? So, for example, last non-direct is almost $33, and then down here, last interaction is only $22. And again, the reason is because this includes direct, right? And I'm excluding direct from the marketing program revenue because I can't say what marketing program drove that. All right. And likely here you can see first interaction versus last interaction. What that's telling you is that those marketing programs are bringing more people to the top of your funnel, if that makes sense to you, right? Versus last interaction, right? So another thing to keep in mind when you're looking at last interaction or last non-direct interaction data. I mentioned double counting before. This is just a quick example. In the assisted conversion, you can see that the assisted conversions here totals 21,500 conversions, and the reality is 20,100. Likewise, you have 2.5 million in total revenue there and 2.1 there. This is a quick summary of the pros and cons of each of the models. I'm looking at the time, and I think I'm just kind of going to breeze through this. Single interaction, what's the biggest, negative? It rewards just one interaction, right? So all of the single interaction models, that's a big negative. based on the data I've shown you. Right? If you look at linear, if you have a business where that first and last steps are more strategic, linear is going to sort of, devalue those first and last. Position-based, if you have a long sales cycle where, middle of the funnel campaigns are nurturing people, you're devaluing those. And for example, time decay, the default half-life in the time decay is 7 days. So if you have a long sales cycle, right, that's not going to be very useful, right, because your early visits are going to get really hardly any value at all. And then finally, those custom channels, the pro is your flexibility. One of the negatives is the fact that you have to start with a baseline. So you have to start with one of the baseline models and then add the customization to it. Here are some other limitations in GA for the attribution. I mentioned this earlier. Your look-back period is limited to 90 days. Off the shelf, you're only attributing digital marketing spend, not any other marketing outliers. I mean, you do have the capability in Universal Analytics to import other data into custom dimensions. We talked about that the other day. But off the shelf, you're only attributing digital marketing. And that's why this really, as I mentioned in that spectrum, this is the first step in that evolution off of single interaction. The double counting that I just mentioned, and it's hard to tailor your weighting by strategy for each campaign or channel. So for example, I mentioned, some clients have the luxury of using display campaigns to drive awareness. So for that, you would want to heavily weight the first interactions for that channel, whereas your long tail product-oriented keywords, which are intended to drive an immediate conversion, you want to weigh those heavily as a last step. And that's a bit difficult to do in this setup. And then the other issue is dealing with that heavy contribution from direct, which could be from the session timeout factor. It's just very hard to know if that's the case or not. That's one reason why I tested in those custom things, removing all direct visits from getting credit. Very quickly, I'm going to show you this great tool from Google. If you're not familiar with it, okay. So this is for lack of a better word, a sort of attribution view for different industries based on size of company, right? So for example, I'm going to show you a hobby and leisure, and you see how things change, right? And I have it set for a large, which I think is 10,000 transactions in 45 days. That's what it said, right? So you can see, for example, you'll notice a lot that direct dominates out here in this study, right? And you can see the role of display at the beginning, social, and now let's go down to small, and you'll see how things change, right? Display stayed there, direct stayed there, but look where display went, and look where organic went, right? So it's kind of a neat thing if your industry is covered in here. So for example, we had health and beauty in our study. That's small. Here's large. For here, B2B type companies, there's large, and then here is small, right? So it's kind of a neat thing to go kind of bounce, well, what does my path look like, and how does it look like in my industry, right? So I wanted to show you that. And as I said, this is where I first discovered this issue about, paid search, branded paid search having such a big contribution to the beginning of the funnel. So for example, we're still in B2B. I'll go to large B2B, and you could see, look at that, 33% branded paid search contribution is in the beginning, only 23% in the end. And let's see which one we did. Food and drink. We have food in our study today. So there's food. 33% versus 22. And let's see how it changes if I go to small food companies. Very similar, right? So I think you get the gist, right? So that's a pretty neat thing. All right. Looks like I have, what, 7 minutes? All right. Here's some thoughts on how you could tackle modeling your own attribution. I think you should think about defining custom channels to separate your marketing and your performance into whatever buckets you want to use, trying to minimize, like I did, that non-attributable revenue. Take a look at your multi-channel funnel reports to understand what your conversion flow distribution and weighting looks like. You know, the top conversion paths, path length, and time lag. Know your average customer lifetime value. Knowing lifetime value is very critical to setting your CPA and your return on ad spend targets for your marketing initiatives, right? It really hamstrings you when you don't know your lifetime value, because then you really don't know how much you can spend to acquire a new customer. Think about ways to attribute that non-attributable revenue, for example, direct and those miscellaneous referrals. If you believe that direct is people who know you and are coming back to you, then maybe you might want to give more of the direct revenue credit to channels that tend to be more retention oriented, like your email marketing program. Include all your marketing related expenses in your modeling, including headcount, right? Decide how you want to allocate any offline marketing. So for example, if you do catalogs, right? How do you want to spread that across those different channels based on the likelihood of a catalog causing someone to come visit your site? And experiment with the different models like I did to see if you can find one that gives you a higher return for marketing dollars spent. And with that, I'll remind you about the free health check. Here's today's thought experiment. By the way, for those of you who are repeat visitors today, it was very interesting. You know, these puzzles are increasingly more difficult, but Monday's performance was the lowest correct percentage. 93% of the entries on Monday were correct, whereas 100% of our entries for Tuesday and Wednesday were correct. So you puzzle people are doing a great job. I'll remind the new people in the audience that the puzzle is available on our NetElixir University LinkedIn page. Email your answers to university@NetElixir, and you're going to get entered into a drawing to win a tablet. Do we have questions? Okay. No questions? Hopefully that didn't overwhelm you all. As I said, I'm happy to help. We're happy to help you with any challenges you might have or any follow-up questions after you digest this. You will be receiving an email with the link for downloading the slides, and eventually the recording of the webinar will get posted as well if you want to listen to it again. And again, I thank you all for attending this week, especially those of you who are every day. And I hope you have a great rest of the week. And take care. We'll see you soon.